The carriage wheels cracked against the frozen road as Edmund gripped the door handle, his knuckles pale, his breathing sharp and uneven. Behind him, torches flickered through the trees, moving fast, moving closer. Someone had betrayed him. He did not know who yet, but he knew this much. If the riders behind him caught up before he reached the border of the estate lands, he would not live to see another sunrise. He banged his fist against the roof of the carriage. "Faster!" he shouted to the driver, a loyal man named Nathaniel who had served his family for over 20 years. "They cannot be allowed to catch us." Nathaniel snapped the reins, and the horses surged forward. But the road ahead curved sharply into a thick forest, and the wheels skidded against loose stone. For a moment, Edmund thought the carriage would topple. He braced himself against the seat, heart hammering, and glanced backward through the small window. The torches were gaining. This was supposed to be a quiet week away from the court, a chance to escape the endless political maneuvering that had surrounded him since his father's passing. Instead, it had become a race through the dark, chased by men who wanted him gone before he could claim what was rightfully his. "There," Nathaniel called out, pointing to a narrow path branching off the main road. "It leads to the village. We can lose them in the streets." Edmund did not argue. He trusted Nathaniel with his life, quite literally, and right now, that trust was the only thing keeping him from panic. The carriage swerved onto the narrow path, branches scraping against its sides, and within minutes, the trees opened into a small clearing where lantern light spilled from cottage windows and voices could be heard, warm and unaware of the danger rushing toward them. "Stop here," Edmund said suddenly. "If we keep going, we lead them straight to innocent people. I need to go the rest of the way on foot. Take the carriage further down the road. Draw them off if you can." "My lord, I cannot leave you unprotected," Nathaniel said, his voice tight with worry. "You are not leaving me. You are giving me a chance," Edmund replied. "Please, old friend. Trust me one more time." Nathaniel hesitated, then nodded once, sharp and reluctant. The carriage rolled forward again, disappearing down the dark road, drawing the torchlight away with it. Edmund stepped out into the cold night air, his fine coat now the only thing marking him as anything other than an ordinary traveler. He pulled off his outer coat, folding it beneath his arm, and straightened the plain shirt beneath it. From a distance, he might pass for a common man. That disguise, however thin, was all he had left. He walked toward the village, his breath forming clouds in the frosty air, his eyes scanning every shadow for signs of pursuit. Somewhere behind him, he heard the faint sound of hooves, and his chest tightened. He quickened his pace, slipping between two cottages, pressing himself against a stone wall as the sound grew louder, then faded, moving in the direction Nathaniel had gone. For a moment, Edmund allowed himself to breathe. It was then that he heard it. A sound so soft, so unexpected, that at first he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. A melody, delicate and unhurried, drifting from somewhere nearby. It was the sound of a harp, played not with the polished perfection of a court musician, but with something rawer, something that felt like truth. Curiosity pulled him forward before caution could stop him. He followed the sound down a narrow lane until he came upon a small gathering outside an old stone hall. Doors open, warm light spilling out onto the cobblestones. A modest crowd had assembled inside, perhaps 30 people, seated on wooden benches, listening to a young woman play. She sat near the front, her harp resting against her shoulder, her fingers moving across the strings with quiet confidence. Her name, he would later learn, was Alira. She wore a simple dress, her dark hair loosely tied back, and there was nothing about her appearance that spoke of wealth or status. And yet, something about the way she played, eyes closed, completely lost in the melody, made him forget, if only for a moment, that men with torches were hunting him through the dark. He slipped inside quietly, taking a seat at the very back, pulling his collar up slightly, keeping his face low. No one questioned him, no one looked twice. In this room, he was simply another villager who had wandered in to listen to the music. The song Alira played was simple, built from only a handful of notes repeated and reshaped, yet it carried something Edmund had not heard in the grand halls of his own estate, not from the finest musicians money could hire. It carried feeling. It carried sincerity. He glanced around the room, still cautious, still alert for any sign that his pursuers might have followed him into the village. But for now, there was nothing. Just warm lantern light, the low hum of quiet conversation between songs, and the melody that continued to fill the hall. An older woman beside him leaned over and whispered, "She's quite gifted, isn't she? Alira's been playing here since she was a girl. Her grandmother taught her. May she rest peacefully." Edmund nodded, careful to keep his voice low and plain. "She plays with a lot of heart." "That she does," the woman agreed. "Are you new to the village? I don't believe I've seen you before." "Just passing through," Edmund replied, his tone even, revealing nothing. The woman seemed satisfied with the answer, and turned her attention back to the performance. Edmund exhaled slowly, grateful the conversation had ended without suspicion. He allowed himself another glance toward the front of the room, watching as Alira transitioned into a new piece, her expression calm, entirely absorbed in her music. For the first time in hours, his racing heartbeat began to slow. The song ended, and the small crowd offered warm applause, some calling out requests for another piece. Alira smiled, thanked them, and reached for a cup of water resting near her feet. She looked tired, yet content, the kind of exhaustion that came from something meaningful rather than something forced. Edmund watched her for a long moment, studying the calm confidence in her posture, so different from the tense, calculated movements of everyone he interacted with at court. There was no performance in her performance, no attempt to impress powerful guests or secure favor. She played because she loved to play, and that simple truth struck him harder than he expected. Outside, faint and distant, he thought he heard the sound of hooves again. His body tensed immediately, every instinct on alert. He turned his head slightly toward the door, listening carefully, but the sound faded, swallowed by the noise of the crowd and the crackle of the hall's fireplace. Still, the moment reminded him sharply of his situation. He could not stay long. He could not afford to be noticed by the wrong person. Not here, not now. Alira began to play again, this time a livelier tune, and several villagers rose to clap along, some laughing, some humming the melody under their breath. Edmund remained seated, watching, careful to keep himself blended into the background, yet unable to look away from the young woman commanding the room with nothing more than a simple wooden instrument and years of quiet practice. A young boy near the front tugged at Alira's sleeve during a brief pause and asked her to play the song about the river. She smiled warmly and nodded, adjusting her hands on the strings before beginning a new melody, slower this time, almost like a lullaby. The room grew quiet again, captivated. Edmund found himself leaning forward slightly, drawn in despite every instinct urging him to remain alert, to remain hidden, to remain ready to flee at the first sign of danger. Something about this small hall, filled with ordinary people enjoying an ordinary evening, felt like the safest place he had been in days. He thought of his father, gone now for nearly a year, and the weight of responsibility that had fallen onto his shoulders since. He thought of the men who wanted him removed from his position, who saw his youth and inexperience as an opportunity rather than a challenge. He thought of Nathaniel, riding somewhere in the dark, drawing danger away from him at great personal risk. And yet, in this moment, sitting in the back of a modest village hall, listening to a stranger play music that asked nothing of him, expected nothing from him, Edmund felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt like an ordinary man, free from the burdens of his title, free from the constant threat that shadowed every step he took. The song ended, and Alira lowered her hands from the strings, resting for a moment before glancing around the room with a soft, tired smile. Her eyes swept briefly toward the back of the hall, passing over Edmund without recognition, without suspicion, simply another face among the crowd. For now, that was exactly what he needed to be. Outside, the torches had not yet found him. Inside, the music continued, warm and unhurried, offering a temporary refuge from a world that wanted him gone. Edmund settled deeper into his seat, allowing himself, just for tonight, to disappear into the safety of a stranger's melody, unaware that this small, unremarkable evening would soon change the course of his life in ways he could not yet imagine. The gathering was far from over, and somewhere out in the darkness, the danger he had escaped was still searching, still circling, still waiting for the moment he stepped back outside these walls. Nathaniel had led the riders nearly 2 miles down the main road before he realized his mistake. The men chasing him were not fooled by the empty carriage for long. When they finally caught up and threw open the door to find no one inside, their leader, a broad man named Frederick who worked for a rival house, let out a furious shout that echoed through the trees. "He tricked us," Frederick snapped, turning his horse in a tight circle. "Search the woods, he cannot have gone far." Nathaniel, who had slipped away on foot the moment the carriage stopped, crouched low behind a fallen log, watching as the riders spread out, torches bobbing through the darkness like restless fireflies. His heart pounded, not for his own safety, but for Edmund's. He had bought time, perhaps an hour, perhaps less. He needed to warn him, needed to find a way back to the village without leading danger straight to it. Inside the village hall, Edmund remained seated, unaware of how close the search had come. Elira had finished another song and was now taking a short rest, sipping water and chatting quietly with a few villagers who had gathered near the front. Her older brother, a broad-shouldered farmer named Henry, leaned against the wall nearby, arms crossed, watching over the small gathering with quiet pride. "You played beautifully tonight," Henry said, stepping closer. "Grandmother would be proud." Elira smiled faintly. "I still hear her voice sometimes, telling me to slow down on the fast parts." Henry chuckled. "She always did say you rushed when you were nervous." "I was not nervous tonight," Elira replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Just tired. It has been a long week." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the hall door creaking open. Cold air rushed inside, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke from distant torches. A few villagers glanced toward the entrance, but no one seemed alarmed, assuming it was simply another latecomer arriving for the evening's music. Edmund, however, felt his entire body tense. He kept his head low, watching from the corner of his eye as a middle-aged woman named Charlotte entered, shaking off the cold, completely unaware of the danger that might be following close behind her. She took a seat near the front, greeting a few familiar faces, and the moment passed without incident. Still, Edmund's pulse refused to settle. He knew he could not remain in this hall indefinitely. Eventually, someone would notice him, would ask questions he could not safely answer, would wonder why a stranger sat quietly at the back without offering his name or his purpose for visiting the village. He needed a plan, and he needed one quickly. As if sensing his unease, Elira rose from her seat and addressed the room. "I think it is time for one more song before we close for the evening," she said, her voice carrying easily across the hall. "This one is new. I wrote it myself, just a few nights ago." A murmur of interest passed through the crowd. Villagers who had heard her play countless songs over the years leaned forward with curiosity, eager to hear something original. Edmund found himself leaning forward as well, momentarily forgetting the danger outside, as she lifted the harp back onto her shoulder and began to play. The melody was different from anything she had performed before, slower, more searching, as if she were still discovering the song even as she played it. There was a vulnerability in the notes, something unfinished and honest, and the room fell into a hush unlike any that had come before. Edmund watched her closely, noticing the way her fingers hesitated slightly over certain notes, not from lack of skill, but from the weight of feeling behind them. He wondered what had inspired such a piece, what memory had shaped its quiet, searching melody. Outside, unseen by anyone inside the hall, a shadow moved along the tree line at the edge of the village. Frederick had split his men into smaller groups, sending them through different paths, determined to search every building, every shadow, every possible hiding place, until the missing traveler was found. One of his men, a sharp-eyed tracker named Oliver, spotted fresh footprints near the narrow lane leading toward the village hall. "This way," Oliver called quietly to two others nearby. "Someone came through here recently." They moved carefully, torches lowered to avoid drawing attention, following the faint trail toward the warm light spilling from the hall's windows. Inside, Elira's song reached its final notes, and as the last chord faded into silence, the room erupted into soft, appreciative applause. She lowered her harp, cheeks flushed slightly from the attention, and offered a small, grateful bow. "That was beautiful," Henry said, walking over to stand beside her. "You should write more like that." "Perhaps," Elira replied, though her attention had drifted toward the back of the hall, toward the quiet stranger who had remained seated through the entire evening, without once speaking to anyone. Something about him seemed different from the usual travelers who wandered through the village. His posture was too straight, too controlled, like a man constantly bracing for something. Before she could think further on it, the hall door swung open again, this time with more force. 3 men stepped inside, their eyes sweeping the room with sharp, searching intensity. The warmth of the gathering shifted instantly into something tense and uncertain. "Evening, friends," Oliver said, his voice pleasant but edged with authority. "We are looking for a traveler who may have passed through here tonight. A young man, well-dressed, possibly weary from travel. Has anyone seen someone matching that description?" The villagers exchanged confused glances, murmuring among themselves. No one had seen such a person, at least not one they recognized as unusual. Edmund kept his head low, his heart pounding so loudly he feared it might betray him. Elira studied the newcomers carefully, sensing something wrong in the way they scanned the crowd, their eyes lingering too long on certain faces, searching for something beyond a simple lost traveler. Her instincts, sharpened by years of reading the moods of a room through music, told her these men were not simply concerned neighbors. "We have not seen anyone unusual," Henry answered calmly, stepping slightly in front of his sister. "Just neighbors enjoying an evening of music." Oliver's eyes swept the room once more, pausing briefly on the back row where Edmund sat, head down, shoulders tense. For a long, tense moment, Edmund believed he had been discovered. But Oliver's gaze moved past him, settling instead on an elderly man sleeping soundly near the fireplace. Clearly not the man they sought. "If you see him, send word to the manor immediately," Oliver said, his tone leaving little room for argument. "It is a matter of some importance." With that, the three men turned and left, the door swinging shut behind them, plunging the hall back into its previous warmth, though the earlier ease had noticeably faded. Villagers exchanged uncertain glances, whispering quietly among themselves about strangers and manor business, and matters that felt suddenly less simple than an evening of music. Edmund remained still for several long seconds, waiting to ensure the men had truly gone. When he was certain, he allowed himself a slow, careful breath, though his relief was far from complete. They were close, closer than he had realized, and they would not stop searching until every corner of the village had been checked. Elira, meanwhile, found her curiosity deepening rather than fading. She glanced once more toward the quiet stranger at the back, noting the way his hands remained clenched tightly in his lap, the way his eyes darted briefly toward the door even now that the immediate danger had passed. Whoever he was clearly troubled by something, and instinct told her it had everything to do with the men who had just left. She did not approach him immediately. Instead, she turned back to the small crowd, forcing a calm smile onto her face. "Well," she said lightly, "shall we finish the evening properly, before all this excitement chases everyone home?" A few nervous laughs rippled through the room, and slowly, the tension began to ease. Elira lifted her harp once more, choosing a familiar, cheerful tune, meant to restore the warmth of the evening. Yet even as her fingers moved across the strings, her mind remained fixed on the quiet stranger in the back row, and the unsettling feeling that something far larger than a simple evening of music had just brushed against their small, peaceful gathering. Outside, Oliver paused at the edge of the village, glancing back toward the hall with narrowed eyes. Something about the atmosphere inside had felt slightly off, though he could not quite place what. He signaled to his companions to continue searching the surrounding cottages, unwilling to abandon the search so easily. Meanwhile, deeper in the forest, Nathaniel moved quietly through the underbrush, his path carefully chosen to avoid detection, his destination clear in his mind. He needed to reach Edmund before Frederick's men expanded their search further into the village. Every minute mattered now, and the growing darkness offered little comfort against the danger closing in from all directions. Back inside the hall, the evening continued, the music once again filling the room with warmth and distraction. Yet beneath the surface, both Edmund and Elira understood, in their own separate ways, that something significant had shifted tonight, something that would not simply fade away once the final note of music faded into silence. As the crowd slowly began to thin, families gathering coats and children, Elira set her harp carefully into its worn traveling case. Henry moved to help her, though his eyes kept drifting toward the door, still uneasy from the earlier interruption. "Do you think they will come back?" Elira asked quietly, once most of the guests had said their goodnights. "I do not know," Henry admitted. But whoever they were looking for, it did not sound like an ordinary matter. Elira glanced once more toward the back of the hall, but the stranger's seat was empty. She had not even noticed him leave. A small knot of worry formed in her chest, though she could not explain why a man she did not know should occupy her thoughts so completely. Outside, hidden in the shadows behind the hall, Edmund pressed himself against the cold stone wall, listening carefully to ensure the search party had truly moved on. His legs ached from remaining still for so long, and his mind raced through every possible path forward. He could not return to the manor, not yet, not while Frederick's men controlled the roads leading there. He needed somewhere to wait, somewhere safe, until Nathaniel could find him again. A soft voice startled him from his thoughts. "You dropped this." He turned quickly to find Elira standing a short distance away, holding out a small silver button that must have fallen from his coat earlier in the evening. Her expression was calm, though her eyes carried a quiet, searching curiosity that told him she had noticed far more than he had hoped. "Thank you," he said carefully, taking the button from her outstretched hand, his voice steady despite the tension coiled tightly beneath his calm exterior. "You are not from the village," Elira said, not as an accusation, but as a simple observation. "And those men who came looking for someone tonight, they were not simply worried about a lost traveler, were they?" Edmund hesitated, weighing his options carefully. He could deny everything, offer some hurried excuse and disappear into the night. Or he could trust this stranger, this young woman whose music had, for one brief evening, made him forget the danger chasing him. "No," he admitted quietly, "they were not." Elira studied him for a long moment, the cold night air settling between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out, and the faint crackle of dying torches echoed from somewhere beyond the tree line, a reminder that whatever danger had passed through the village tonight had not yet truly gone. "I will not ask who you are," she said finally, surprising him. "But I know a place you can rest, away from prying eyes, at least until morning." Edmund studied her carefully, weighing the risk of trusting a stranger against the growing exhaustion pulling at his limbs. He had little choice left. Why would you help someone you know nothing about? Elira considered the question seriously before answering. "Because tonight, for a few moments, you listened to my music the way I always hoped someone would. Whatever trouble follows you, I do not believe it changes who you were in that room." Her words settled something uneasy in his chest, and for the first time since the chase began, he allowed himself to trust another person completely. "Lead the way," he said quietly, "and I will explain what I can, once we are somewhere safer." They moved quickly through the narrow lanes behind the hall, avoiding the main road where torchlight still flickered faintly in the distance. Elira guided him toward a small storage building behind her family's cottage, used mostly for drying herbs and storing tools during the winter months. It was cramped, smelling faintly of dried lavender and old wood, but it offered shelter from both the cold and any watching eyes. "You can rest here tonight," she whispered, pulling a worn blanket from a nearby shelf and handing it to him. "My brother checks this building rarely, and no one else has reason to come this way before morning." "I am grateful," Edmund said, settling onto an overturned crate, the blanket wrapped tightly around his shoulders. "More than you know." Elira lingered near the door, clearly torn between curiosity and caution. "Whatever happened tonight, whoever those men were searching for, I hope it resolves itself peacefully." "So do I," Edmund replied, though his tone carried little confidence. He knew Frederick would not simply give up, not when so much depended on removing him from his position permanently. The danger had only been delayed, not defeated. Elira nodded slowly, sensing there was far more to this stranger's story than he was willing to share tonight. "Rest," she said softly. "We can talk more in the morning, if you are still here." She slipped out quietly, leaving Edmund alone in the small, fragrant darkness of the storage building. He listened to her footsteps fade toward the main cottage, and only then did he allow the full weight of the night's events to settle over him. He had escaped capture, for now, but the men hunting him remained close, patient, and utterly determined. Outside, hidden among the trees at the edge of the village, Oliver crouched low, watching the quiet cottage with narrowed, patient eyes. He had seen the harpist lead someone toward the storage building, and though he could not be certain of the stranger's identity, instinct told him this quiet village held more secrets than its peaceful appearance suggested. He would wait until morning, and then, he would return with the rest of Frederick's men, ready to search every building, every hidden corner, until the man they sought was finally found. Morning arrived with a pale, uncertain light, filtering weakly through the cracks of the storage building's wooden walls. Edmund woke stiff and cold, his body aching from a night spent on an overturned crate, his mind immediately alert to the danger that had not disappeared simply because he had managed a few hours of uneasy rest. He heard footsteps approaching outside, careful and quiet, and his hand instinctively reached for the small knife tucked into his boot, a habit born from years of court politics rather than any real skill with weapons. The door creaked open slowly, and he relaxed slightly upon seeing Elira slip inside, carrying a small basket covered with a cloth. "I brought bread and cheese," she said quietly, setting the basket down beside him. "It is not much, but it should help." "Thank you," Edmund replied, genuinely grateful. "You did not have to do this." "No," Elira agreed, settling onto a nearby stool. "But I find myself curious enough that I would rather help you than send you away without answers." Edmund studied her for a long moment, weighing the risks of honesty against the growing sense that he owed this woman more than vague explanations. She had risked her own safety to hide him, had asked for nothing in return beyond simple curiosity. Perhaps, he thought, the truth was the least he could offer. "My name is Edmund," he said finally, "and the men searching for me last night were not looking for a lost traveler. They were looking for me specifically, on behalf of a man who wishes to see me removed from a position I only recently inherited." Elira's eyes widened slightly, though she remained remarkably composed. "Removed how?" "Permanently if given the chance," Edmund admitted grimly. "My father passed away less than a year ago, and since then, certain powerful men have grown restless, believing my inexperience makes me an easy target for replacement. Frederick, the man leading last night's search, works for one such rival house." "And the manor they mentioned," Elira said slowly, pieces beginning to align in her mind. "That would be your family's estate." Edmund nodded. I am the Duke of that estate, though clearly my title offers little protection when the danger comes from within my own circle of supposed allies. Elira sat back slightly, processing this revelation with a calm that surprised even herself. She had suspected something significant lay behind the stranger's tension, but the truth exceeded even her wildest guesses. A duke, hiding in my family's storage shed, she murmured, a faint, almost disbelieving smile tugging at her lips. That is not something I expected when I woke this morning. I understand if this changes things, Edmund said carefully. If you wish to distance yourself now that you know the full danger involved. It does not, Elira replied without hesitation. If anything, it makes me more determined to help you. No one deserves to be hunted for simply inheriting what is rightfully theirs. Her words steadied something anxious within him, and for a brief moment, Edmund allowed himself to feel something other than fear and calculation. Gratitude, perhaps, or something warmer that he did not yet have the space to fully examine. I need to find my driver, Nathaniel, Edmund said, returning his focus to the immediate danger. He drew the search away from me last night, but I do not know if he escaped safely or if he was captured. I can help you search, Elira offered immediately. I know these woods better than most, and no one would question me walking through them. A traveling duke, however, would draw far too much attention. Edmund hesitated, uncomfortable with the idea of placing her in further danger on his behalf. Yet practicality won over his reluctance. Alone, he risked recognition at every turn. With Elira's local knowledge and unremarkable presence, they stood a far better chance of locating Nathaniel without drawing unwanted attention. Very well, he agreed. But if at any point this becomes too dangerous, you must promise to turn back. Agreed, Elira said, though her tone suggested she had little intention of abandoning him at the first sign of trouble. They left the storage building separately, careful to avoid drawing suspicion. Meeting again at the edge of the forest where the trees grew thick enough to offer some concealment, Elira led the way, her steps confident and familiar with the winding paths that crisscrossed the woodland surrounding the village. This way, she said, pointing toward a narrow trail that led deeper into the trees. If your driver managed to escape the road, he likely would have taken shelter somewhere along this route. There is an old hunting cabin not far from here that villagers sometimes use during storms. They moved quickly but carefully, both aware that Frederick's men remained somewhere nearby, still searching, still determined. Edmund found himself grateful for Elira's calm presence beside him, her steady confidence a stark contrast to the constant tension that had gripped him since the chase began. Can I ask you something? Elira said, breaking the silence as they walked. Of course. Last night, when you listened to my music, what were you thinking? You seemed so far away, even while sitting right there in the room. Edmund considered the question carefully before answering. I was thinking that I had not felt so calm in longer than I could remember. Everything in my life since my father's passing has been calculated, careful, filled with people who want something from me. Your music asked for nothing. It simply existed, honestly, without any hidden purpose. Elira absorbed his words quietly, something soft shifting in her expression. I never think of my music as anything special. It is simply what I know how to do, what my grandmother taught me before she passed. That is precisely what made it special, Edmund replied. Nothing about it was performed for effect. It felt real. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of rustling leaves ahead, both of them freezing instantly, hearts pounding with uncertainty. Edmund's hand moved toward his boot knife again, though he doubted its usefulness against armed pursuers. Elira placed a steadying hand on his arm, silently urging caution. From behind a cluster of thick bushes, a familiar figure emerged, and Edmund felt a wave of relief wash over him. Nathaniel, he breathed, hurrying forward. Nathaniel looked exhausted, his clothes torn slightly from a night spent avoiding capture, but he was alive, and, more importantly, unharmed. My lord, he said, his voice rough with relief. I feared the worst when I could not find you along the road. I found shelter in the village, Edmund explained quickly. This is Elira. She has helped me more than I could have hoped. Nathaniel studied the young woman carefully, offering a respectful nod. Then you have my gratitude as well, miss. We should not linger here, Elira said, glancing nervously toward the surrounding trees. Frederick's men were searching through the night. They may still be nearby. As if her words had summoned the very danger she feared, the sound of approaching horses reached their ears, distant, but growing steadily closer. Edmund's chest tightened instantly, every instinct screaming at him to run, though his mind raced to calculate the safest direction. This way, Nathaniel said urgently, gesturing toward a narrow ravine partially hidden by overgrown brush. I found this path last night. It leads toward the far edge of the forest, away from the main roads. They moved quickly, ducking low to avoid detection, the sound of hooves growing louder behind them. Edmund glanced back once, catching a brief glimpse of torchlight flickering through the trees, far too close for comfort. Faster, he urged quietly, though his own legs ached with exhaustion from the previous night's tension. Illyra kept pace easily, her familiarity with the terrain proving invaluable as she guided them around fallen logs and thick patches of brush that might otherwise have slowed their escape. Nathaniel followed closely behind, occasionally glancing back to ensure no one had fallen too far behind. The ravine deepened as they continued, offering better concealment but also making their path more difficult to navigate. Edmund's foot caught on a hidden root, and he stumbled, barely catching himself against a nearby tree trunk. Illyra reached out instinctively, steadying him with a firm grip on his arm. "Careful," she whispered, her eyes scanning the path ahead for further obstacles. "Thank you," Edmund replied breathlessly, grateful once again for her steady presence amid the chaos surrounding them. They pressed forward for what felt like an eternity, though in truth only a quarter-hour passed before the sound of pursuing horses finally began to fade into the distance. Nathaniel signaled for them to pause, all three of them catching their breath in a small clearing surrounded by thick, protective trees. "I believe we have gained some distance," Nathaniel said quietly, though his tone remained cautious, "but we cannot assume they have given up the search entirely." "They will not stop," Edmund said grimly. "Frederick has invested too much in ensuring my removal to abandon the effort now." Illyra studied him carefully, noting the exhaustion evident in his posture, the weight of responsibility clearly pressing heavily upon him despite his youth. "What will you do?" she asked. "You cannot hide in the forest indefinitely." "I need to reach an ally," Edmund explained. "A trusted family friend named Arthur, who holds significant influence at court. If I can reach his estate, he may be able to help me expose Frederick's actions and secure my position properly." "How far is his estate?" Illyra asked. "Nearly a day's ride under normal circumstances," Nathaniel answered. "Though without the carriage, and with Frederick's men actively searching, the journey will prove considerably more difficult." A heavy silence settled over the small clearing as they considered their limited options. Edmund glanced toward Illyra, an idea slowly forming in his mind, though he hesitated to voice it, unwilling to place her in further danger than she had already accepted on his behalf. "There may be another way," Illyra said suddenly, breaking the silence. "My cousin owns a small cart used for transporting goods to the neighboring towns. If we could reach my family's farm without drawing attention, we might be able to use it to travel more quickly and less conspicuously than on foot." "That could work," Nathaniel said, considering the suggestion carefully. "A farm cart would draw far less suspicion than a duke's carriage, or three travelers moving suspiciously through the forest." Edmund studied Illyra with renewed appreciation, recognizing the risk she continued to accept simply to help someone she had known for less than a single day. "You continue to surprise me," he said quietly. "I surprise myself as well," Illyra admitted, a faint smile touching her lips despite the tension surrounding them. "I never expected an evening of music to lead toward hiding a duke from armed pursuers." "Nor did I expect to find safety in a simple harp melody," Edmund replied, the words carrying more weight than perhaps either of them fully understood in that moment. Nathaniel cleared his throat gently, drawing their attention back toward the pressing danger surrounding them. "We should move quickly, before Frederick's men regroup and expand their search further." They set off once more, moving carefully through the forest toward Illyra's family farm, each step carrying them further from immediate danger, yet deeper into a shared journey neither Edmund nor Illyra could have anticipated when the evening's music first began. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with risk and the looming threat of discovery, but for the first time since the chase began, Edmund felt something beyond fear guiding his steps forward, a quiet, unexpected hope rooted in the trust of a stranger whose simple melody had, against all odds, become his unlikely refuge. As they neared the edge of the forest, the farm's weathered barn roof visible through a break in the trees, Illyra slowed her pace slightly, glancing toward Edmund with a serious expression. "Once we reach my cousin's farm, there will be no turning back from this. My family will be involved, whether they wish to be or not." Edmund met her gaze steadily. "I understand the risk I am asking you and your family to accept. If there was another way, I would take it." "I am not asking you to reconsider," Illyra replied firmly. "I am simply ensuring you understand what this choice means, for all of us." "I understand completely," Edmund said, his voice quiet but resolute, "and I will not forget what your family risks on my behalf." With that understanding settled firmly between them, they continued forward, emerging cautiously from the tree line toward the modest farm that would soon become the next crucial step in Edmund's dangerous journey toward reclaiming his rightful place, and toward a future neither he nor Alira could yet fully imagine, though both sensed, in the quiet spaces between their words, that whatever happened next would bind their paths together, far beyond this single, perilous night. The farm belonged to Alira's cousin, a steady, quiet man named George, who raised sheep and grew barley on land that had been passed through their family for 3 generations. When Alira explained, in careful, measured words, the situation they now found themselves in, George's face paled, though he did not hesitate. "If the young lord needs a cart, he shall have one," George said firmly, wiping his hands on his worn trousers. "But we must move quickly. Word travels fast in these parts, and if Frederick's men learn we have offered assistance, they will not look kindly on it." "I am grateful for your courage," Edmund said sincerely, extending a hand toward the farmer. George shook it firmly. "Anyone willing to fight against men who hunt down the innocent deserves whatever help I can offer. Besides," he added, glancing toward Alira with a small, knowing smile, "my cousin rarely asks for favors, unless the cause truly matters." Within the hour, George had prepared his cart, loading it with sacks of grain to disguise its true purpose, tucking a small hidden space beneath false boards where Edmund could remain concealed during the most dangerous stretches of the journey. Nathaniel, meanwhile, adjusted his own appearance, borrowing simple farm clothes from George to blend more easily into the role of a traveling merchant's assistant. "This should hold until we reach Arthur's estate," George explained, securing the final boards over the hidden compartment. "It will not be comfortable, my lord, but it should keep you hidden from prying eyes along the road." "Comfort is the least of my concerns right now," Edmund replied, climbing carefully into the cramped space beneath the grain sacks. Alira lingered nearby, watching the preparations with a mixture of determination and quiet worry. "I am coming with you," she said suddenly, drawing surprised glances from both Nathaniel and George. "Alira," Nathaniel began cautiously, "this journey grows more dangerous with every mile. It may be safer for you to remain here, away from further risk." "I disagree," Alira replied firmly. "A young woman traveling with a merchant cart draws far less suspicion than 2 men alone. If anyone questions us along the road, I can help explain our presence far more convincingly than either of you." Edmund, listening from within his hidden compartment, found himself both moved and concerned by her insistence. "She makes a fair point," he called out quietly, "though I remain uneasy asking her to accept further danger on my behalf." "You are not asking," Alira said pointedly. "I am choosing." Nathaniel exchanged a glance with George, both men recognizing the futility of arguing further against her resolve. "Very well," Nathaniel conceded, "but we move carefully, and at the first sign of serious danger, you retreat to safety immediately." "Agreed," Alira said, though her tone suggested she had little intention of abandoning them, regardless of the risks ahead. The cart set off shortly after, rolling steadily along a quieter back road that George assured them avoided the main routes most heavily patrolled by Frederick's men. Alira sat beside Nathaniel on the driver's bench, her posture relaxed and unassuming, playing the role of a simple farm girl accompanying her father's assistant on a routine delivery. The morning passed slowly, tension coiling tighter with every mile they traveled. Twice, they passed other travelers along the road, farmers and merchants going about their ordinary business, none paying particular attention to the modest cart rolling past. Each time, Alira offered a friendly wave or a brief greeting, maintaining the illusion of an unremarkable journey. By midday they had covered significant distance, though exhaustion and the cramped conditions had begun to wear on all 3 travelers. Edmund, hidden beneath the grain sacks, remained silent for long stretches, though occasionally Alira would speak softly toward the hidden compartment, offering quiet reassurance or simply filling the silence with gentle conversation. "Tell me about your father," she said during one such quiet stretch, her voice barely above a whisper, ensuring only Edmund could hear. "What kind of man was he?" Edmund considered the question carefully before answering. "He was patient, more patient than I often deserved growing up. He believed strongly in fairness, in treating those beneath his station with the same respect as those above it. I fear I have not yet lived up to the standard he set." "You are still young," Alira replied gently, "and from what I have witnessed these past 2 days, you carry his values more closely than you realize. Not many men of your position would trust a stranger, let alone accept help so readily." "Perhaps," Edmund said, though uncertainty colored his tone, "or perhaps I simply had no other choice left." "Even without choices, character reveals itself in how we treat those who help us," Alira countered. "You could have demanded my assistance, ordered it as your right. Instead, you asked, and you thanked me. repeatedly, as if my help were a gift rather than an obligation. Her words settled warmly in his chest, offering a small measure of comfort amid the constant tension gripping their journey. You continue to see things in me that I struggle to recognize myself, he admitted quietly. Their conversation was interrupted abruptly as Nathaniel's voice called out sharply from the driver's seat. Riders approaching, coming fast from the east. Elira's body tensed immediately, her earlier calm replaced instantly with sharp alertness. She glanced toward the horizon, spotting a small group of horsemen approaching rapidly along a crossroad ahead, their formation suggesting purpose rather than casual travel. Stay hidden, she whispered urgently toward the compartment beneath the grain sacks, before straightening her posture and adopting an expression of calm, unbothered ease. The riders drew closer, and Elira recognized, with a sinking feeling, the sharp-eyed tracker from the previous night's search, Oliver, leading 3 other men on horseback. Her heart pounded, though she forced herself to maintain a relaxed, unconcerned demeanor as the riders approached the cart. "Afternoon," Oliver called out, reining his horse alongside the slow-moving cart. "Where are you headed with this cart, if you do not mind me asking?" "Delivering grain to the market in the next town over," Nathaniel answered smoothly, his voice steady despite the danger evident in his eyes. "My employer's usual route, nothing unusual." Oliver studied them both carefully, his gaze lingering a moment too long on Elira's face, clearly attempting to place her among the villagers he had questioned the previous night. "You were at the music gathering last evening, were you not?" Elira's heart nearly stopped, though she forced a light, easy smile onto her face. "I was indeed. My harp playing keeps our small village entertained on quiet evenings." "I remember now," Oliver said, though his tone remained carefully neutral, giving little away about his true suspicions. "A talented performance from what I recall." "Thank you," Elira replied, maintaining her composed exterior despite the fear coiling tightly within her chest. Oliver's eyes drifted briefly toward the grain sacks piled high in the back of the cart, and for one heart-stopping moment, Elira feared he might order the sacks searched. Instead, his attention shifted back toward Nathaniel, studying him with renewed scrutiny. "And you," Oliver said slowly. "I do not recall seeing you at the gathering." "I rarely attend such events," Nathaniel replied smoothly. "Music holds little appeal for a man focused on honest work." Oliver studied him for a long, tense moment, before finally nodding, apparently satisfied, though his expression remained guarded. "Very well. Safe travels then. Should you encounter a young traveling lord along your route, well-dressed despite recent hardship, send word immediately to the manor. There is significant reward for information leading to his location." "We will certainly keep watch," Nathaniel said, his tone carefully neutral despite the dangerous implications hidden within Oliver's words. The riders continued past them, thundering down the road toward the horizon, leaving the cart rolling forward in tense, uneasy silence. Elira released a breath she had not realized she was holding, her hands trembling slightly despite her earlier composure. "That was far too close," she whispered once the riders had disappeared from view. From beneath the grain sacks, Edmund's muffled voice responded quietly. "You handled that remarkably well. I owe you my life, quite literally, for your composure just now." "We are not safe yet," Elira reminded him, though relief clearly colored her tone as well. "We should continue quickly, before they reconsider their suspicions." Nathaniel urged the horses forward at a slightly faster pace, though careful not to draw further attention through reckless speed. The remainder of the afternoon passed with cautious tension, every distant sound of hooves or voices causing renewed alertness among the 3 travelers. As evening approached, the outline of Arthur's estate finally came into view, nestled among rolling hills far removed from the immediate danger surrounding Edmund's own manor. Relief washed over the small group as they approached the estate's gates, though caution remained necessary until they could confirm Arthur's continued loyalty and willingness to help. Nathaniel guided the cart toward a side entrance, avoiding the main gate where unfamiliar guards might question their unusual arrival. A trusted servant, recognizing Nathaniel immediately, hurried to fetch Arthur personally, understanding the gravity implied by such an unexpected and cautious visit. Arthur emerged quickly, his expression shifting from confusion to serious concern the moment he recognized Nathaniel's urgent posture. "What has happened?" he asked immediately. "Where is Edmund?" "Hidden, safely, within this cart," Nathaniel explained quietly, glancing around to ensure no unwanted ears listened nearby. "Frederick has moved against him directly, attempting to remove him permanently from his position." Arthur's expression darkened considerably. "I feared something like this might occur, given Frederick's increasingly aggressive maneuvering at court. Bring him inside immediately, quietly, before anyone notices your arrival." The hidden compartment was carefully opened, and Edmund emerged, stiff and exhausted from the cramped journey, though relief was evident in his tired eyes upon seeing Arthur's familiar, trustworthy face. "Thank goodness," Edmund said, embracing the older man briefly. "I feared I might not reach you safely." "You are safe now," Arthur assured him firmly. "Come inside, all of you. We have much to discuss, and precious little time to waste before Frederick realizes where you have sought refuge." As they moved quickly toward the estate's private chambers, Elira lingered slightly behind, suddenly aware of how far she now stood from the familiar comfort of her village and her simple harp performances. Yet despite the uncertainty surrounding her, she felt no regret for the choices that had led her to this moment. Standing at the edge of a political struggle far beyond anything she could have imagined just 2 days prior, Edmund paused at the chamber's entrance, glancing back toward her with quiet gratitude. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, "know that your courage these past 2 days has meant more to me than you could possibly understand." "We are not finished yet," Elira replied, offering a small, determined smile despite her own exhaustion. "Let us ensure this journey ends the way it should." Together they stepped inside, ready to confront the dangerous political maneuvering that threatened not only Edmund's rightful position, but potentially his very life, aware that the coming hours would determine far more than either of them could yet fully comprehend. Inside Arthur's private study, candlelight flickered across old maps and stacks of correspondence, as Edmund recounted the full details of Frederick's betrayal, the letters intercepted weeks earlier hinting at a conspiracy, and the sudden violent chase that had forced him from his own estate. Arthur listened carefully, his expression growing increasingly grim with each revealed detail. "This confirms what I suspected but could not prove," Arthur said finally, rising from his chair to pace slowly across the room. "Frederick has been quietly gathering allies among the smaller houses, promising favors and positions in exchange for support should your removal succeed. He intends to claim guardianship over the estate himself, citing your supposed inability to manage such responsibilities properly." "Can we prove this?" Edmund asked urgently. "Without solid evidence, accusations alone will not be enough to secure my position permanently." "There may be a way," Arthur said slowly, considering the possibilities carefully. "One of Frederick's own men, a young clerk named Vincent, approached me privately several weeks ago, troubled by the increasingly dangerous instructions he had witnessed. If we can convince him to testify formally before the regional council, his testimony combined with the intercepted letters should prove sufficient to expose Frederick's actions entirely." "Where can we find this clerk?" Nathaniel asked, understanding immediately the urgency required. "He works within Frederick's household directly," Arthur explained. "Approaching him carries significant risk, particularly now that Frederick's suspicions are clearly heightened following last night's failed search." Elira, who had remained quietly listening throughout the conversation, spoke up thoughtfully. "What if someone unconnected to the estate approached him instead, someone whose presence would not immediately raise suspicion?" Arthur studied her with renewed interest. "You are suggesting yourself?" "I am simply a village musician," Elira said carefully. "If I claimed interest in performing at Frederick's household, seeking new opportunities beyond small village gatherings, it would provide reasonable cause to enter without raising immediate alarm." Edmund's expression shifted instantly to concern. "Elira, that plan places you directly within danger's reach. Frederick is not a man who tolerates uncertainty kindly." "I understand the risk," Elira replied firmly, "but I also understand that without solid proof, your rightful position remains permanently threatened. If there is any chance I can help secure that proof safely, I am willing to attempt it." A tense silence settled over the room as Edmund weighed the danger against the desperate need for evidence. Finally, reluctantly, he nodded. "If you insist on this path, we ensure every precaution possible. Nathaniel and I will remain nearby, ready to intervene should anything go wrong." Arthur nodded in agreement, already formulating the necessary details. "We will send word ahead, framing your visit as a recommendation from a traveling merchant impressed by your musical talent. It should provide sufficient reason for Frederick's household to allow your entrance without excessive scrutiny." The plan was finalized quickly, every detail carefully considered to minimize risk while maximizing the chance of successfully reaching Vincent without alerting Frederick's suspicions. By the following morning, Elira found herself standing before the imposing gates of Frederick's estate, her harp case held steadily despite the nervous tension coiling tightly within her chest. A stern-faced guard studied her carefully before permitting entrance, escorting her toward the main hall where household staff moved about their daily duties with brisk efficiency. Elira maintained her composed exterior, reminding herself repeatedly of the crucial purpose behind her calculated visit. She was directed toward a small waiting room, instructed to prepare for a brief performance intended to entertain visiting guests later that evening. As she settled her harp gently against her shoulder, testing the strings quietly, a young man entered the room hesitantly, carrying a stack of documents. "Pardon me," he said softly, glancing nervously toward the doorway before continuing. "You are the musician, recommended by the traveling merchant?" "I am," Elira replied carefully, recognizing immediately that this must be Vincent, the clerk Arthur had mentioned. "And you are?" "Vincent," he confirmed quietly, setting the documents down carefully. "I apologize if this seems forward, but word travels quickly within this household. I understand you may carry connections to Lord Edmund's situation." Elira's heart quickened, though she maintained careful composure. "I do," she confirmed cautiously, "and I understand you may hold information crucial to proving certain dangerous actions taken against him." Vincent glanced nervously toward the door once more before lowering his voice further. "I have witnessed things I should not have. Instructions given regarding Lord Edmund's removal that go far beyond simple political maneuvering. I have wanted to speak out, but fear for my own safety has kept me silent." "Your safety matters greatly," Elira assured him gently. "But so does justice, and the rightful protection of an innocent man's position. Arthur is prepared to ensure your protection completely, should you agree to testify formally before the regional council." Vincent hesitated, clearly torn between fear and conscience. If Frederick discovers my involvement before the council convenes, the consequences could prove severe. "Which is why timing and secrecy remain absolutely crucial," Elira replied. "Arthur has arranged safe passage for you, ready whenever you choose to act, but the longer we wait, the greater the risk that Frederick solidifies his position beyond our ability to challenge it." Vincent nodded slowly, resolve gradually replacing his earlier hesitation. "Very well. I will gather the necessary documentation tonight, proof of instructions given directly by Frederick himself. Meet me near the eastern gate after midnight, when household security shifts change and attention grows lax." "I will be there," Elira promised, relief flooding through her at Vincent's crucial agreement. Their conversation ended abruptly as footsteps approached the room, and Vincent quickly gathered his documents, offering Elira a brief, meaningful nod before departing hastily through a side entrance. Elira resumed tuning her harp calmly, maintaining her composed cover as a stern-faced servant entered to escort her toward the evening's performance. The hours passed with agonizing tension as Elira performed before Frederick's assembled guests, her fingers moving skillfully across familiar melodies despite the anxious uncertainty gripping her thoughts. Frederick himself observed briefly from across the hall, his expression calculating and distant, offering no indication of suspicion toward the quiet musician performing before his guests. As midnight approached, Elira excused herself quietly, claiming exhaustion after her lengthy performance, and made her way carefully toward the eastern gate as instructed. The corridors grew increasingly quiet, household staff retreating toward their private chambers, security guards shifting positions exactly as Vincent had predicted. She found him waiting nervously near the gate, a small satchel clutched tightly against his chest. "I have everything," he whispered urgently. Letters detailing Frederick's plans, along with written instructions clearly implicating him in the attempted removal. "Then we must leave immediately," Elira replied, equally urgent. "Arthur's carriage waits just beyond the northern tree line, ready to transport us safely toward the regional council." They moved quickly through the shadows, hearts pounding with every step, acutely aware of the danger surrounding their escape. As they neared the tree line, however, a sharp voice cut suddenly through the darkness. "Stop right there." Elira's blood ran cold as Oliver stepped forward from the shadows, flanked by 2 additional guards, his expression sharp with dawning suspicion. "I thought something seemed unusual about your sudden visit," he said, addressing Elira directly. "And now I find you sneaking away with Frederick's own clerk, carrying documents you clearly should not possess." Vincent froze in place, panic evident in his wide eyes, though Elira forced herself to remain calm despite the danger surrounding them. "We are simply leaving for the evening," she said, attempting a steady tone despite her racing heart. "I do not believe that," Oliver replied coldly, stepping closer, his hand resting meaningfully near the hilt of his sword. "Hand over whatever documents you carry, immediately." Before either Elira or Vincent could respond, a familiar voice called out sharply from the darkness behind them. "That will not be necessary." Edmund stepped forward from the shadows, Nathaniel close behind him, both having remained hidden nearby exactly as planned, ready to intervene should danger arise. Oliver's expression shifted instantly from suspicion to alarm, upon recognizing Edmund clearly for the first time. "My lord," Oliver said, momentarily caught off guard, "you should not be here." "And yet here I stand," Edmund replied firmly, his voice carrying newfound authority despite the danger surrounding them. prepared to expose the truth behind Frederick's dangerous conspiracy, with evidence that will soon reach the regional council regardless of whatever actions you attempt tonight. Oliver hesitated, clearly uncertain how to proceed against the very man he had been ordered to capture, especially now confronted directly rather than hunted secretly through darkened forests. Frederick will not allow this evidence to reach the council, he said finally, though uncertainty colored his previously confident tone. Frederick's ability to prevent justice ends tonight, Edmund replied steadily. You have a choice, Oliver. Continue serving a man who has clearly betrayed his oaths and endangered innocent lives, or step aside and allow rightful justice to proceed. A tense silence stretched between them, broken finally as Oliver lowered his hand slowly from his sword, clearly recognizing the shifting balance of power now that Edmund stood openly before him, supported by clear evidence and Arthur's influential backing. I have followed orders faithfully, Oliver said quietly, but I did not sign on to endanger innocent lives needlessly. He stepped aside slowly, gesturing for his companions to lower their weapons as well. Go quickly, he said, before Frederick learns of tonight's events. Relief flooded through Alira as they hurried past, Nathaniel guiding them swiftly toward Arthur's waiting carriage hidden discreetly beyond the tree line. Vincent climbed inside first, still trembling from the tense confrontation, followed closely by Alira and Edmund. As the carriage pulled away swiftly into the night, Edmund reached over, gently taking Alira's trembling hand within his own. You have risked everything tonight, he said softly, for a cause that was never truly yours to bear. It became mine, Alira replied quietly, the moment I chose to help you that first evening. The carriage carried them swiftly through the darkness toward the regional council chambers, where Arthur had already arranged an emergency session, gathering influential lords and officials prepared to hear the damning evidence against Frederick's dangerous conspiracy. Vincent's testimony, combined with the intercepted letters and documented instructions, proved overwhelming, leaving little room for doubt regarding Frederick's guilt. Within days, Frederick's plans collapsed entirely, his allies quickly distancing themselves from the exposed conspiracy, unwilling to risk their own positions through continued association. The regional council formally confirmed Edmund's rightful position, ensuring his authority remained secure and unquestioned moving forward. Edmund returned to his estate finally, exhausted but victorious, accompanied by Nathaniel, Arthur, and Alira, whose courage had proven instrumental throughout the dangerous ordeal. Standing once again within the familiar halls of his childhood home, Edmund felt the weight of uncertainty finally lifting from his shoulders. You saved far more than my position, he said quietly to Alira, as they stood together within the estate's quiet gardens, the danger finally behind them. You saved my belief that genuine kindness still exists, even amid the calculated ambitions surrounding positions of power. I simply did what felt right, Alira replied modestly, though warmth colored her voice as she met his grateful gaze. Perhaps, Edmund said, but few possess the courage to act on what feels right when danger threatens so directly. I owe you a debt I fear I may never fully repay. Alira smiled softly, glancing around the peaceful gardens surrounding them. Perhaps you could start by inviting a simple village musician to play here occasionally, somewhere far removed from danger, where music can exist simply for its own sake. Edmund returned her smile warmly. That, he said, would be my honor. As the sun set gently over Edmund's now secure estate, casting warm golden light across the peaceful gardens, both Edmund and Alira understood that whatever came next in their unexpected, intertwined story, it would be built upon a foundation far stronger than politics or position, a foundation formed through genuine courage, trust, and the quiet, honest truth of a simple harp melody that had once, against all odds, offered refuge to a hunted man on the most dangerous night of his life. Weeks passed, and life within Edmund's estate slowly settled into a steadier rhythm, though the memory of Frederick's betrayal lingered like a shadow over daily proceedings. The regional council had stripped Frederick of his lands and influence entirely, sending him into a quiet, disgraced exile, far from the political circles he had once manipulated so confidently. His former allies, eager to distance themselves from any lingering suspicion, offered their renewed loyalty to Edmund, though he accepted their gestures with careful, measured caution rather than blind trust. Vincent, whose brave testimony had proven crucial in exposing the conspiracy, was offered a respected position within Arthur's household, grateful for the protection and opportunity extended toward him, despite the significant risk he had accepted. He visited occasionally, always expressing quiet gratitude toward Alira, whose calm guidance had steadied his nerves during the most dangerous moments of their shared ordeal. Alira, meanwhile, found herself increasingly drawn back toward Edmund's estate, invited regularly to perform within the quiet gardens where their earlier conversation had taken place. Though she remained careful never to presume too much upon Edmund's attention, given the significant difference in their respective positions, their friendship deepened steadily with each visit, built upon genuine conversation rather than empty formality. One afternoon, several months after the danger had finally passed, Edmund found her seated alone within the garden, her harp resting quietly beside her as she gazed thoughtfully across the peaceful grounds. He approached slowly, settling onto the bench beside her without invitation, though her welcoming smile suggested his presence was far from unwelcome. "You seem thoughtful today," he observed gently. "I was thinking of my grandmother," Elira admitted. "She always told me that music finds its way toward exactly where it is needed most, even if we cannot always predict where that place might be." "She sounds like she was a wise woman," Edmund replied. "She was," Elira agreed softly, "though I doubt even she could have predicted her granddaughter's harp melody, leading toward hiding a duke from armed pursuers." Edmund chuckled quietly at the memory, though the danger they had faced together remained serious enough that neither could fully dismiss its weight. "I have been meaning to ask you something," he said, his tone shifting slightly toward careful consideration. "What is it?" "The estate has long maintained a tradition of supporting local artists and musicians, though admittedly the practice fell somewhat neglected during recent years of political turmoil. I would like to properly reinstate that tradition, beginning with an official position for a resident musician, someone trusted to bring genuine artistry back into these halls." Elira studied him carefully, understanding the implication behind his words. "Are you offering me such a position?" "I am," Edmund confirmed, "though I understand if you wish to remain within your village, among your family, and the familiar life you have always known." Elira considered his offer thoughtfully, weighing the comfort of her familiar village life against the unexpected opportunity now presented before her. "My family will always remain important to me," she said slowly. "But perhaps there is room within my life for both worlds, my village roots and this new opportunity you offer." "Then you accept?" Edmund asked, hope evident despite his careful attempt at composed patience. "I accept," Elira confirmed, a warm smile spreading across her face. Over the following months, Elira settled gradually into her new role, dividing her time between performances within Edmund's estate and regular visits back toward her village, ensuring her family and childhood community remained firmly woven into her expanding life. Henry, initially skeptical of his sister's sudden connection toward nobility, gradually warmed toward the arrangement upon witnessing genuine respect and warmth exchanged between Elira and Edmund whenever their paths crossed. Nathaniel, too, found himself increasingly involved within the estate's daily operations, his loyalty and steady presence throughout the earlier crisis earning him significant trust and expanded responsibility under Edmund's continued leadership. Arthur remained a close, valued advisor, his guidance proving instrumental as Edmund gradually solidified his rightful authority across the broader region. As seasons shifted and the estate settled fully into peaceful stability, Edmund found himself increasingly drawn toward quiet evenings spent within the garden, listening as Elira practiced new melodies, occasionally requesting his opinion on pieces still taking shape beneath her careful attention. Their conversations grew steadily more personal, extending beyond simple gratitude toward genuine friendship, and eventually, something deeper neither had fully anticipated when their paths first crossed amid danger and uncertainty. One evening, nearly a year after that first fateful night when Edmund had stumbled desperately into a small village hall seeking refuge from armed pursuers, he found himself once again seated quietly among a small gathered crowd, listening as Elira performed before an audience that now included villagers and estate residents alike, brought together through her efforts to maintain connection between both communities she now called home. She played the same simple melody she had performed that very first night, the one written originally for her late grandmother, its notes now carrying additional meaning shaped by everything that had unfolded since. Edmund listened closely, recognizing immediately the familiar tune, memories of that dangerous, uncertain evening flooding gently through his thoughts. When her performance concluded, Elira caught his gaze across the crowded room, offering a warm, knowing smile that spoke volumes beyond simple words. Edmund rose from his seat, making his way toward her through the dispersing crowd, his own smile matching hers completely. "You played that same melody," he observed quietly, once he stood beside her. "I thought it fitting," Elira replied, "given everything that first performance eventually led toward." "It led toward more than I ever could have anticipated," Edmund said softly, "when I first slipped quietly into the back of that hall, simply hoping to remain unnoticed. And yet," Elira said, "here we are, exactly 1 year later, with nothing hidden between us any longer." Edmund reached for her hand gently, the warmth of genuine affection evident within his careful touch. "I find myself endlessly grateful," he said. "That danger led me toward exactly the place I needed to be that night, even if I could not have predicted it at the time." "Perhaps," Illyra replied thoughtfully, echoing her grandmother's wisdom once more. "Music truly does find its way toward exactly where it is needed most." Together they walked slowly through the quiet estate gardens as evening settled gently around them, their unlikely journey from danger and uncertainty toward genuine partnership complete, built upon foundations of courage, honesty, and the simple, enduring truth carried within a single harp melody that had, against every possible expectation, changed the course of both their lives entirely. In the years that followed, Edmund's estate became known throughout the region not only for its stability and fair governance, but for its vibrant support of local artists and musicians, a tradition Illyra nurtured carefully, ensuring young performers from humble villages received the same genuine opportunity she herself had once been offered. Their story, quiet and unassuming as it had begun, became a gentle reminder to all who heard it that true connection often arrives not through grand gestures or calculated design, but through small, honest moments, shared freely between strangers willing to trust one another when it mattered most. And though the danger that once threatened their very lives eventually faded into distant memory, the melody that had first brought them together remained a constant presence within the estate's peaceful halls, played often within quiet gardens, carrying forward the simple truth that had defined their entire journey from the very beginning, that genuine kindness, offered without expectation of return, holds the power to change everything.